everyone, and welcome to this session called Success Starts with IELTS. Begin your journey to the USA with IELTS. My name is Andrea Scott, and I'm the IELTS USA Senior Product Champion. I'm delighted to have you with me today, and I've seen already that you have many questions, so I'm hoping that by the end of this session they will be answered. Many of the ones that I've seen you've been posting in the chat room and already here are ones that I'm going to be talking about. So I know that these are important issues for you. A little bit of background about me. Prior to taking this position part-time, my entire career was in admissions for college and universities, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. And I ended my career by being the Office of Admissions for the Graduate School Director at the University of Minnesota. So I'm very familiar with IELTS, both now as the Senior Product Champion, but it started many years ago because the admissions office at the graduate school did use IELTS. And so I became very familiar with the high quality of IELTS, and therefore am delighted to be able to do this now in this part-time position. What I'm going to be doing today is starting with an overview of IELTS, then talking very briefly about the format of the test, and then the body of my discussion is going to be about preparation that you can make for taking IELTS, as well as some tips for how to actually take the test. And then I'm going to talk briefly about our scoring system so that you have some idea about that, and tell you a little bit about U.S. colleges and universities requirements for IELTS. And then finally I'm going to close with some information about how you'll be receiving your results. So let's get right into it. Starting with, what is IELTS? Well, it stands for the International English Language Testing System, and as you've already heard, we pronounce it IELTS. It is an English language proficiency test for non-native speakers of English who have plans to study or work where English is the language of communication. We call it a 4 skills test because it tests it tests language proficiency for listening, reading, writing, and speaking in English. And I want to emphasize how fair and accurate and reliable the test is, one of the reasons that we are very proud of our test. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry that I skipped ahead there. I don't know what happened, a little technology glitch, I guess. There are 5 things that we think are really important for you to know about IELTS. First, it is a paper and pencil test. All of our research shows that for students such as yourself, when you are taking a high-stakes test such as an English language test, even if you are very computer literate, you feel more comfortable taking a test in paper and pencil because you feel you are more in control of the test. That goes for the reading, listening, and writing section of the test. The 4th part of the test, speaking, is a live face-to-face interview with an examiner. And this is what makes IELTS unique among all English language tests that are offered. And again, we do this because we feel that you are more comfortable in an interview situation. You will hear me say throughout the presentation that there are a number of things that we do to try to make the test experience as good for you as possible so that you can perform at your absolute top when you are taking the test. There are 2 versions of the test, academic and general training. The general training is used primarily for employment and immigration purposes and for study at below the college and university level. The academic version, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, is used for admission to colleges and universities at all levels, meaning 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, and professional schools. We grade the test on what we call a band scale, of which there are 9 bands that range from 1, which means you're a non-user, to 9, which means you're an expert user. Beyond that, all of those bands have half points, so you might be receiving a score of 5.5 or 7.5, for example. The fourth important thing to know about IELTS is how widely recognized it is around the world. There are over 8,000 organizations around the world that do use IELTS scores, but what is most important to you is that there are over 3,000 colleges and universities in the United States that do accept IELTS scores for admission. And then finally, IELTS is jointly owned by the British Council, IDP IELTS Australia, and Cambridge English Language Assessment, which means that we have a global partnership that has test examiners writing questions in all standard varieties of English, meaning North American, Australian, and British, and the examiners are in Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain. They are writing test questions in what we term international English, and we feel that that is reflective of what you are going to be experiencing when you are studying here in the US. That is accents from many different speakers of English. I mentioned the 8,000 institutions around the world that accept IELTS. IELTS is also around the world in terms of where the test is given. The map there in IELTS red explains all of the countries where IELTS is being offered. It's over 900 locations in more than 130 countries, and that number is growing all of the time. In addition, the test is very accessible in the sense that it is offered up to 4 times per month at any one of those locations. That makes 48 dates. They are set dates on Saturdays and Thursdays throughout the year. So how do you find out where you can take the test? Well, there is a section just for you on our website, IELTS.org. As you can see here on the home page, there is something called the test takers section, which is one way you can look for information about taking the test. But the easiest way, right off the top page, is to use this index here on the right, which is in alphabetical order by country. You can find your country and then click on that, and when you go to that, you will see a list of cities where IELTS is being offered, and you can click on the city, and then what will come up are the test centers or center in that city that is offering IELTS. And when you click on each of those test centers, you will get detailed information about when the test is being offered, the specific dates of those Thursdays and Saturdays that are upcoming. You will get the specific street address of the test center. You will also have access to the test center website and contact information for the test center. And then finally, there will be an indication of what the fee is for taking the test. And in the US, at our about 50 test centers, the fee ranges from $190 to $210, and that would be comparable around the world to give you some idea that you'll be expected to pay a fee of something comparable to $190 to $210 US. The benefit for you, another one of those things that we're doing to make the test experience more comfortable for you, is that it is payable in foreign currency, so you do not have to deal with currency exchange. Now, as I said, I'm going to just briefly talk about the test format, and as you can see there, it takes about 3 hours total. There are 4 sections reflective of the 4 language skills. Listening, reading, and writing are offered back to back to back on the morning of the day you were taking the test, either that Thursday or Saturday. Then, in most cases, there is a lunch break, and after lunch you go through a security check again, and then you do the speaking test. And the speaking test is designed to be as close to a normal speaking environment reality as is possible for you, again, to put you more at your ease. And I'm going to be talking in detail about each of these sections when I talk about preparation and tips. One thing to keep in mind is that on occasion, the speaking test will not be offered on the same day as the rest of the test. In that case, it will be given to you up to 7 days before or after the other 3 sections of the test. So now I'm going to go into a section here to talk about how you can prepare for taking IELTS, starting with that test takers tab that I showed you a slide ago. If you click on that, there is a lot of information and helpful hints for you, starting with what we call our Information for Candidates brochure. You can download that, and it's an overview of the test, much as what I've been talking about right here, but in more detail. There also is a section that you can click on that has sample IELTS test questions, so you can see exactly the kind of thing that you are going to be asked to respond to. And then there also is a place that you can click on to go for something called Tips for Test Takers. And that is going to be similar to what I'm going to be talking about shortly. Again, even more detailed information. All of those things are free online for you to view. You can, in addition, from the Test Takers tab, make a purchase of what we call the official IELTS practice materials, which comes in 2 volumes. You can purchase it online, or you can also purchase it at your local IELTS test center, and it has a great many example test questions, plus in volume 1 there is a CD that has examples of actual listening test questions. You can hear the listening questions being posed. Then you also learn what the score on the test was, and the examiner comments indicating why that score was given. In addition, in volume 2, there is a DVD, and the DVD is of the speaking test. So you see a video, several videos of actual speaking tests taking place, and again, you can see the score at the end of the test and the examiner comments about why that score was given. In addition, you can sign up for an intensive English language class or an IELTS workshop or preparation course. You should check with your Education USA center in your country, because oftentimes they are the ones that offer those. And of course, and I'm going to be saying this over and over again, practice, practice, practice your English in all of those 4 skills so that you can improve, but also to determine what your strengths and weaknesses are so that you can concentrate on those. And finally, I just want to say that in terms of practice materials, the only one that IELTS recognizes and endorses is our official practice materials, volumes 1 and 2. Another way to prepare for taking IELTS is using our social media. We have 2 Facebook pages. On the left here is the IELTS USA Facebook page, which has information about the colleges and universities in the U.S. that do accept IELTS. We feature a different college and university weekly or monthly. And there are also our answers to frequently asked questions. And in addition, there is information about studying in the U.S. and what that experience will be for you. We have information about United States sports and holidays, and what it's like to be on campus, information about our academic calendar, which can be broken into either quarters or semesters, and even things like what we call the Greek system, which is fraternities and sororities, and what that experience might be like for you. On the other Facebook page, which is called the IELTS official Facebook page, there is similar information about test centers and tips for taking the test, but in addition, we have live Q&A on that site, so if you have questions that you wish to pose and be answered by experts, you can use the IELTS official for that. And finally, we have a YouTube channel, which is listed here, and on that are videos from students who have already taken IELTS, and they are sharing their tips for taking the test, which may be a little bit different than what those of us who administered the test are telling you. And then they also talk about their experience of taking the test, and then how IELTS has made a difference for them in terms of their academic career. Okay, now I'm going to get into that tips section, and what I'm going to be doing is talking about each section with a little bit of information about the test itself and tips you should know about taking the test, and also giving you some ideas about ways you can prepare. So with listening, there are going to be 4 recorded messages, and before each of them you will have a few moments to read the questions that you are going to be expected to answer. So make sure that you review those questions carefully. They will be presented in the same order as the answers appear in the listening. So be careful to carefully follow both the questions and the listening section. Also, it's very important to pay close attention because the recording is only going to be played once. You will have a question paper that you can follow along on, and you're going to be having 10 minutes at the end of the question, at the end of the recording, to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. So what you should be doing is writing down your answers next to the questions as you hear those answers, so that then you'll be prepared for transferring them to the answer sheet. When you do fill out the answers on the answer sheet, make sure you write legibly, because someone will be reading those and you want them to be able to understand what you're saying. For this section of the test, you must write your answers in pencil, and be very careful about the word limit you are given for the different answers, because if you write more words than you were asked for, you will lose points for that. And you also will lose points for spelling and grammar, so you want to make sure that you use your best spelling and grammar. If you decide that you want to change an answer, you can either cross it out or erase it thoroughly and write in a new answer. And also, we recommend that if you're not sure about the answer, just go ahead and guess, because you're not going to be downgraded if you won't receive points if you leave answers incomplete or blank, so you might as well take a guess in hopes that you will get points. Ways to prepare for listening, and I will be saying this over and over again, is to do listening. So in this case, for listening, you should be listening to anything that you have available to you for listening in English. So that would be videos online. There are lots of those now. Listen to those. Listen to English speaking TV channels like CNN, that's probably available in your country. US channels are ABC, NBC, CBS, British, the BBC. The good thing about listening to both US and British channels or Australian is that you will have an opportunity to listen to different accents. And as you may remember, I said that the test is going to be having people speaking in different accents, so you should be prepared to recognize that when you are listening. Otherwise, watch movies or TV where the language is English, but don't read the subtitles. Just listen to what you are watching and try to pick up the language that way. Don't use the crutch of using the subtitles. And finally, let's see, is there anything more that I want to say about this? No, I guess that's it. So let's move on to academic reading. And in this case, the reading section is 60 minutes long. There are 3 reading passages, 3 different ones. And here, you won't be writing on the questions section and then transferring your answers. You're going to be answering directly on the answer sheet. So you're not going to have extra time at the end to fill out an answer sheet. Again, you must write in pencil, and it's very important, again, to follow the instructions very carefully. And here is a hint: practice skimming, because you're going to have these long passages to read, and don't try to understand every word. Instead, do what we call skimming. And you can practice that when you are practicing your reading. Get the gist of the theme of the passage, and don't try to figure out the meaning of every single word. Try to spend 20 minutes on each task, because there are 3, but you are not going to have someone telling you to move on to each passage. So you're responsible for keeping track of the time yourself and knowing generally how much time you are spending, so that you know you should be moving on to the next passage. A way to help you with answering the questions at the end of the passage is to underline things, information that you expect will be very important, or names or numbers that might come up in questions. One thing, some of the questions, the answers will be yes, no, or not given. And so you need to understand that no means that whatever the statement is in the question is wrong. Not given, if you choose to give that as your answer, it means that the information is not available in the question. So then you can choose that as your response. In terms of ways to prepare for taking reading, again, practice, 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 read, read, read. And so you have lots of opportunities, starting with online. Find things to read in English online. Also, if you have access to news and magazine articles in hard copy, you can read those, read blogs online. And as I said, practice those skimming skills, because that will serve you well. And then you can keep a notebook of new words that you have learned, and as you compile the list, go back and go over them to help yourself remember what they are. Again, for academic writing, you need to pay attention to the instructions given, and in this case, specifically the number of words required. There are going to be 2 writing tasks. You'll have 60 minutes. The first one requires 150 words, and the second 250. You have to write at least that number or you will be graded down. And so it's one of the things that you can help yourself with in terms of preparation and practice is when you are writing for practice, learn to recognize from your own handwriting what looks like 150 and 250 words. That'll help you at the time that you're taking the test to have in your mind, this looks like 150 words, so that when you count it, you know that it's going to come up just about that number. Here, by the way, you can write in pen or pencil. It's your choice. And because, again, a human being is going to be reading what you have written, it is extremely important to write legibly. Again, you will not be told by a proctor or a supervisor when to move on to the second task. So you need to keep in mind how much time you are spending on the first one and move on after 20 minutes if possible to go on to task 2. Because this is a writing test, your spelling, grammar, and punctuation are things that you are going to be graded on, so you need to be very careful to use them to the best of your ability, and leave time at the end, a few minutes, to proofread what you've written to make sure that you catch any mistakes that you may have made. You should stay on the topic, whatever the question is that you're writing on. Don't wander off and add things that aren't relevant, especially if you are just trying to pad what you are saying. Keep on topic. And write in a sequence, so there is a progression through your thoughts, and use linking words to go from one idea to the next. It's a good idea to either start and or conclude with some kind of overview of what you're going to be talking about, even just a sentence, so that the reader knows what the thrust of your argument is going to be. Ways to prepare for writing, again, write. So you can write your emails in English. I mentioned keeping a journal of words that you are learning. Well, also just keep a journal on whatever topic that you would like to write about every day, or just keep a journal of what's happening to you every day. That's a good way to practice writing. Also, you can use social media in English, of course, and if you have somebody that you can communicate with on a regular basis, either texting or email, and use that English, that's a good way to practice. With the speaking test, probably one of the most important things to be familiar with is exactly how the speaking test is going to take place in terms of the time, over the time that it is given. And that time is from 11 to 14 minutes. And the examiner, who, as I said early on, is a live in-person interviewer, is going to be timing the test. So one of the things that I will tell you right now is if you get cut off in mid-sentence in one of these sections that I'm going to be discussing, don't worry about that, because the examiner has a time clock and needs to keep you within the 11 to 14 minutes time frame. So there are 3 sections. The first is the introduction. The second is what we call the individual long-term, and finally the two-way discussion. The introduction is just what it says. It starts with the examiner asking you to introduce yourself, and then goes on to several very familiar topics that should be very easy for you to respond to. Things like, tell me about your family, or tell me about your hometown. This section will last for about 4 to 5 minutes, and the whole purpose of it really is to set you at your ease so that you are comfortable with the 2 following sections, which are more difficult. One thing that I might suggest you do when you're giving your introduction is to smile. You can smile throughout the whole speaking test, because when you're smiling, there is evidence that that relaxes you, and so you will do a better job of speaking to the examiner. Another tip for preparation for doing the speaking test is to practice introducing yourself. Since you know that you're going to have to do that right off the bat in the speaking test, do practice until you can introduce yourself very well. After the introduction, then we go into what is called the individual long term. And how this works is, first the examiner is going to explain to you what happens, and what will be happening is that she will be giving you a topic and tell you that you have a minute to organize your thoughts, and will be giving you a piece of paper and a pencil so that you actually can write down those thoughts. You'll have 1 minute to do that, and what you should do is jot down everything that you can think of that you want to say about the topic, and put them in order so that when you are about to speak, you can refer to your notes. And when I say about to speak, at the end of the minute of preparation, the examiner will say, okay, begin speaking. And you will be required to speak nonstop for 1 to 2 minutes about that topic. 1 to 2 minutes is a pretty long time to stop to talk nonstop. So that's why it's really important to practice speaking for a lengthy period of time. So before you take the test, one of the things you can do to prepare is, on any topic, speak for 1 to 2 minutes out loud, like you're going to be required to do. The topics here will be general topics. You don't have to worry about getting something that you know nothing about. For instance, you might be asked something like, tell me about a person in the world that you admire and why, or tell me about leisure time and sports activities in your country. So you can see that they're pretty easy topics. The hard part comes in speaking nonstop about it. At the end of your 1 to 2 minutes, the examiner will ask a couple of questions expressly related to what you have said, and then move directly into what we call the two-way discussion. And here, it will be the same topic as what you've just talked about, but the examiner has a number of questions already prepared that she will be asking you about that topic. And so you will go back and forth, and this section again will be about 4 to 5 minutes. For some hints about what you should be doing while you're speaking, since you are going to be graded on this, use a wide range of grammar and vocabulary as much as possible. And if you are at a loss for words, then you can use fillers such as well or so. Let me see about that. And then you have a moment to gather yourself before you go on to what you have thought about what you want to say. And as with the writing, as indicated here, you need to plan to support and defend whatever your opinions are on what you are discussing. So for preparing, again, practice, practice, practice. Speak English wherever you have the opportunity to do so, and that means holding live conversations, maybe online, video chat sessions. You can record your voice and if you have the opportunity to do so, and listen to it to see how you need to improve. And one thing you can do is right before you go into the test room, start thinking in English, so your mind is already, and speaking out loud, so that you are already in the English mode when you go in to take the test. On the actual test day, here are some things to keep to help you to have a successful experience. Number one, arrive early. There are two really good reasons for this. One is that the check-in process is quite extensive, as you might imagine, and so if you arrive early, there will be plenty of time for you to get through that process. You should receive an email from the test center prior to the test date after you register, which details all of the things that are going to be happening on the day of the test, so you have an idea of what to expect. And if you don't get that within a week of the test, then you should contact the test center to ask them to please provide that information for you. But it should come automatically, and from that you will see why it's important to arrive early. The second thing is that if you arrive early, you can cut down on your stress level because you won't be worried about getting there in time and getting through the whole process. You have to bring your ID, either a valid passport or national identity card. It must be the same one that you used on the day in your registration materials, and as I said, it must be valid, not expired. If you don't have your ID, you won't be admitted to take the test. I should have said about arriving early. If you arrive late, you might not be able to take the test, but depending on the test center and the test center staff, there is a possibility that you still could take the test if you're late. But with no ID, you cannot enter the test room. What you should bring are pens, pencils, and erasers. As I mentioned, you can use pen or pencil for the writing section and pencils for the other two. And if you want to erase your answers, you should bring an eraser to change answers, or as I said before, you can cross out two. What you shouldn't bring are valuables and any electronic devices. Don't bring your mobile, don't bring your iPad, because if you do, the test staff takes away all of those materials from you, bags them up, and puts them in a secure room while you are taking the test. So you might as well not bring them because you're going to have to give them up anyway. As with the different sections of the test where I've been saying follow the instructions closely, with the process of going through checking in, you should listen carefully to the instructions and also follow them very carefully. And of course, it is a stressful day, but try your best to stay calm because that's how you will perform better. I said early on that IELTS is graded on a 9-point scale. The 9 points we call bands, and the highlighted section here, 5 to 8, are the most commonly used required scores by colleges and universities in the U.S. You can see that they range from what is called a modest user at 5 to a very good user at 8. If you can see the screen, you can also see that there are more detailed definitions of what those different bands mean. This information, by the way, is available at IELTS.org, so if you can't see the small print there, you can go to IELTS.org and actually read the definition of the different bands. Remember that there are half bands again, so institutions might be requiring a 6.5 or an 8.5. Also, there are several additional requirements that institutions have the ability to do, such as if you are going to graduate school and intend to be a teaching assistant, it may be that the indication will be that you must have a 6.5 for admission to the graduate school, but a 7.0 if you are going to be a teaching assistant. Or in highly rigorous programs, or especially professional schools, they may require a higher score in a particular section. So, for instance, a law school may require 7.0, but because law requires good writing skills, they may say 7.0 plus 7.5 in writing. Or journalism might do the same thing, 6.5 overall, but 7.0 in writing. Another thing to be aware of is that there are colleges within universities, and different colleges may have different score requirements. So, as I said, a law school might require 7.5, but the graduate school might require 7. And oftentimes, undergraduate admissions will require a 6 or a 6.5, and graduate admissions will require a 7.5. So how do you find out, or where do you find out, where all of these different requirements are? First, I wanted to show you this. These are some actual institutions in the U.S. and their score requirements, so that you can see some of the things I've been talking about. At the undergraduate level in the U.S., the range of minimum scores for the most part are between 6.0 and 7.0. You can see at the graduate level it's 6.0 to 8.5, and that's because graduate school is more rigorous education, and so in many cases there are higher expectations. Columbia, as you can see here, is a good demonstration of what I was talking about. The Columbia Graduate School requires 7.0, but the Columbia School of Journalism, the professional school, requires an 8.5 minimum overall score from IELTS. And then we have professional schools such as the MBA program at Harvard, which requires a 7.0, and here again the range for professional schools in the U.S. Is pretty much 6.0 to 8.5. And if you're planning on applying to an LLM program in the United States, you can see here that Duke requires 7.5 and Indiana University 7.0. And again, the range is higher because it is a professional school, so the range we see is from 6.5 to 8.0. Now we're going to talk about where you can find the information about the score minimums that are required. So what I'm going to do is show you some actual web pages that have indications of IELTS requirements, and point out some of the things that I've been talking about. This is the Office of Undergraduate Admissions web page at the University of Michigan, and you will see here that they say they require IELTS 6.5. However, they require each section also to be 6.5. So you can't just average 6.5 as your overall score. You have to get that 6.5 in addition in each section. This is the graduate program in Civil and Environmental Engineering at MIT. And here, not only do they require 7.0 overall, but they also have a Master of Science and a PhD with emphasis in transportation, and that particular part of Civil and Environmental Engineering requires 7.5, and then you will see here highlighted in yellow that the program indicates that they prefer IELTS as the English language proficiency score that is submitted. So if you see that, you know that they recognize that IELTS is that reliable indicator of your English ability, and you will stand yourself in good stead if you take IELTS, if that's the indication. And finally, a professional school. This is the LLM program at The Ohio State University, and here is an example of one of those high scores again, because Ohio State believes that their LLM program requires really good communication skills. A final place that you can look for scores, minimum requirements, beyond college and university websites and hard copy catalogs and handbooks is on the IELTS.org website, and there are two places there. One is at bandscore.ielts.org, and that takes you to what we call our Global Recognition System, or GRS, and there you can search by keywords such as location, a state in the United States, for instance, or a city, or by keyword the name of the institution. And what will come up is information about that institution, where it is located, and what the IELTS scores requirements are at undergraduate, graduate, professional, and also those additional requirements that I have been referring to. The other place is also at IELTS.org, but it's /USA. This is the IELTS USA page, and here you will see something that says the recognition list, the U.S. recognition list, and if you click on that, you will go to a spreadsheet. It's not searchable as the GRS is, but it is an alphabetical listing, both by state and by institution, of all of those 3,000 plus institutions in the U.S. that do recognize IELTS. You'll get the information there about the minimum scores required, as well as the city and state location, and the scores information will be the same. What's required at 2-year, 4-year, and graduate and professional level, plus any additional requirements. When it's time, once you've taken the test and you're ready to get your test results, there are several pieces of information I want to share with you about that. Probably the most important to you is, when are the test results available? They will be posted by the end of the 13th calendar day after you've taken the test. All throughout that day, the test scores from around the world are being posted, and by the end of the day, they will all be posted. They are reported on what we call the test report form, or TRF, and you will be receiving one personal copy of the score mailed to whatever address you put on your registration form. So make sure you put down the address that you want it to come to, and make sure that you put down the address correctly so it can come to you. And keep that copy safe, because it's the only one you're going to be receiving. We cannot reissue a personal copy. In addition, you have the opportunity to request that your scores be submitted to 5 institutions. You can do that either on the registration form or at the test center. And we will be sending your scores out one of 2 ways. It's the choice of the institution to either receive your scores on paper or online. So once you indicate where you want the scores to go, we will know how to send the scores to that institution. You should know specifically the address of where you want the scores to go, so that we make sure that we send it to the right place, especially if it's an institution where there are several different programs. The scores may be going to several different places, so make sure that you get the right address for the scores to be sent to. This is a sample of an actual TRF paper, but the online report that the institutions receive have all of the same information, including, as you see here, each of your section scores, and then over here is the overall band score. And the way we arrive at that overall band score is by rounding up to the closest half band or whole band. So if your score ends in .25, we'll be rounding it up to a half band score. And if it ends in .75, your average of those 4 sections there will be rounding up to the full band score. And if for some reason you don't think that your results are what they should be, you can ask for a remarking, which we call an inquiry on results, or EOR, which you must submit the paperwork for that within 6 weeks. There is an administrative fee for that. However, if your marks go up, the fee will be refunded, and you will be receiving results of that within 6 to 8 weeks after you submit the request. So I want to go over answers to some of the most important questions probably in your mind, and the ones that we receive questions about most frequently. First of all, where is IELTS accepted? Well, beyond those 8,000 organizations worldwide, there are over 3,000 colleges and universities in the U.S. that do accept IELTS scores. The test is offered at 900 testing locations around the world on Saturdays and Thursdays. There are 48 set test dates, and in some places the test will be offered 4 times a month. How often at a particular test location depends on the demand at that location. So if your test location has a high demand, they certainly will be offering the test 4 times a month. But if the location where you'll be taking the test has a low demand, it might only be offered 1 time a month. Again, the test results are issued by the end of the 13th calendar day after the test, and the results come directly from the test center. This is important for you to know, because if you decide at some time that you want to have additional test reports issued, then you have to go back to the test center to request more score reports. They do not come from a central location. And by the way, I forgot to mention that you can request additional score reports to be delivered, but there is a small administrative fee for doing that. Finally, I would just like to say a few things about what I personally see as the benefits of taking IELTS. And it really all goes back to our philosophy of trying to make the experience an experience that is very important to you as comfortable and stress-free as possible. It starts with the makeup of the test, that writing component, paper and pencil component, which we believe is the way students can do their best. Also the face-to-face speaking test, which is in a private room, which means that there aren't distractions. You won't be in a room with a number of other people talking into a microphone. It's easier for you because of all of the testing locations around the world. It's easier for you because the test fees are set in local currency and you don't have to go through exchange. And it is a benefit to you to be able to know that you are sending accurate and fair results to your institution, and your institution likes that you are taking IELTS because they know that it is a secure and very reliable test. And then finally, as English is becoming the international language, and we are the test that test English as an international language, that is the ultimate benefit to you. So thank you very much for being here with me and listening. As I said at the outset, I know that you have lots of questions, and I could see that in the chat room. I know also that I answered many of them in this presentation, but I'm now ready for about 10 minutes to answer questions live here, and then I will be moving over to the chat room to respond to questions there. So you can send your questions right now here, and at the top of the hour I will switch over to the chat room, which will be open until 1900 today, and I will be there to monitor, as will several of my colleagues, my IELTS colleagues, throughout the day so that we can respond to any questions that you have. Again, thank you very much, and let's start the questions now. So the first question, what I'm going to be doing is reading the questions that I'm receiving and then responding so that all of you can hear my response. This one says, I am from Colombia and my English is not perfect. Can I apply for this program? Absolutely. A common question is, how do I know, what is the passing grade for IELTS? There is no passing grade or failing grade. As I explained in my presentation, there are bands of, that describe your English language proficiency. So if your English is not perfect, you will get less than a perfect band score, but you still could get a very good band score. And so I would recommend that if you're saying your English isn't perfect, that implies that it's pretty good, and I would go ahead and take the test. If your English is not very good at all, then I would say practice more, study more, and then take the test. This question says, I need some learning materials or textbooks. Where can I get them? Well, as I said, the gateway to all of this really is the IELTS.org website, and go to test takers, and there you will find tips for test takers, an overview of the test, and some sample questions, and also information about how to actually purchase the IELTS practice materials. This is a really excellent question. What particular details should there be in our introduction? So I would say, kind of think about what I said at the beginning. I said my name, I said my title, which you obviously, maybe you do have a title. If you are working someplace and you want to say that, you could give your title there. But I would say something like, I am Andrea Scott, and I am 16 years old, and I live in whatever your hometown is. I have studied I have studied at these schools, and I'm looking forward to studying in the U.S. And if you know what institutions you are particularly interested, mention those. So I would say just personal information about yourself. Your age, the things that I said might be asked to set you at your ease. So you can start by taking the lead and sort of setting the tone instead of waiting for the examiner to ask questions of you. If you just say your name and hello, then the examiner will start asking you questions, and you can take sort of control of that section if you talk about yourself and personal details about yourself right from the start. Another absolutely excellent question. Is it okay to use American English instead of British English in the IELTS exam? For example, to use apartment instead of flat or subway instead of underground. That is an absolute yes, it's okay. In fact, we expect that, and we use both English and British, both American and British English, and expect answers to be in either way. And if you are writing them, the only thing we require is that when you are using either the British or English spellings, that you spell them correctly, because that is part of the test, that you spell correctly. But using British spellings or American spellings are fine, and also in the speaking test to say apartment or flat is just A-okay. This question is, could you give me an online test to give me more practice to see my actual level? I'm afraid that we don't have facility to do that. What I would suggest is that you just practice speaking. Well, if you were talking about the test overall, then I would get the practice materials and fill out the test questions, and you should be able to get a grade at the end of that. Also, preparation courses will give you a test so that you can see what your level is. But in terms of us giving you a pre-test, we don't have that ability. All we have the ability is to give you samples of test questions and then tell you what the answer is so that you have an idea yourself. I'm going to answer one more question, and then we're going to switch over to the chat room. This one is, are there IELTS simulations online that gives an approximate band score? I want to understand in which band score I am now so I can plan my studies to get the score I need. Again, there are not ones for you to take and get a band score. We don't give pre-test results, but with the official IELTS materials, there are, in the practice materials, there are examples and then what the band score will be, and the opportunity for you to answer questions and find out if the questions are properly answered or not. And with that, I see that it's 8 o'clock, and so now I am going to close out here, and we will move over to the chat room. Once again, thank you for listening, and thank you for your very excellent questions.